Can you introduce yourself and where we are?
Absolutely. I'm Tabatha Badger. I am the local member for Lyons with the Tasmanian Greens. We are currently in the Deloraine Community House, which is doing a fantastic job. One of two community houses in the area, and I'm a big fan of the Meander Valley House's op shop because it is one of the best in Tasmania, hands down.
Why did you enter politics?
I went into politics primarily to be a voice for the magnificent wild places that we have here in Tasmania that need so much more of a voice, particularly in a climate and biodiversity emergency. But I certainly didn't enter it to be a politician. I very much see it as an avenue for creating much needed change in a time when we very much need to drastically turn around a lot of the systems that we have in place.
Can you talk a little bit about your background and how you came to be in politics?
Yeah, I've done a lot of work in conservation and land management, and in my time alone I've seen the changes in the natural environment. Primarily in Lyons is also where I've always worked, and I've seen how important it is to continue voicing what we are currently seeing, and everyone in different communities is seeing that in different ways. Like even the agricultural industry in particular is seeing a lot of heavy impacts, and then you see the impacts on a lot of the coastal communities with increasing sea level rise and extreme weather events as well. So there's so many different impacts that a variety of people are seeing that need to be brought to attention as soon as possible. I've done a bit of work for various environmental organisations such as the Restore Pedder campaign. I was their campaign director for a while.
What does that do?
So they're trying to restore Lake Pedder in the Tasmanian Wilderness World Heritage Area as the dams are coming up to the end of their life cycle, requiring a lot of work, being on a major fault line. It's now time in the biodiversity crisis to invest that money into restoring this magnificent national icon that is in the World Heritage Area with the very intent that it is one day restored, and now is that time.
You were chair of the Wilderness Society as well?
Yeah, I was convener of the Wilderness Society, and everyone's very familiar with the work that the Wilderness Society does, what they've done so staunchly for Tasmania for many decades. It's an incredible organisation that's now gone national as well, that plays a very important role for protecting things like our forests that are critical habitat for various animals, and obviously a key part of carbon sequestration too. And
you ran a business in ecotourism before as well. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you studied at uni as well?
I've done various studies in conservation and land management, and I was running a small business up on the East Coast. Mm-hmm. And being a business on the East Coast, there was partially tour operated and hospitality as well. It's very heavily reliant on tourism. So when COVID hit, I did take that opportunity. It was that time in a small business operation where you either revamp it and remodel it or step away. And I thought maybe that it was time for something new for me. And I did go back to university and study a Masters in Tourism during that quiet period in 2020 into 2021 as well, which was fantastic to apply what I'd learnt on the East Coast into a master's degree and learn more about the prospects of that industry moving forward, given Tasmania as a state is so reliant on parts of the tourism industry, a lot of small towns are, really how we could change our perspective of the tourism industry to encompass all the lessons that we learnt coming out of COVID, to make sure that we are holistically more resilient into the future if we see anything like that, or when we see anything such as a pandemic close down the global industry again.
What are some of the more important issues for you? You've talked about some things already, but if you can not boil it down, but talk a bit about what is most important.
It's hard to pick one issue that's most important at the moment, because we're in a cost of living crisis, a housing crisis, climate and biodiversity crisis, and an inequality crisis as well. There's so much going on that affects so many different people, and particularly in Lyons, it's quite a unique electorate composed of small communities, and every one of those communities is facing their own challenges but also has their own opportunities. So really at the moment, making sure that young Tasmanians are not going to be shouldering the burden of massive intergenerational debt, that we are trying to lighten that load for them, not increase it. And making sure that we are respecting the natural environment in what we're doing in development, even in new housing developments. Let's look at new affordable alternatives in medium density, for example, to make sure that we've got homes available for young people, and owning your own home isn't out of the picture for younger Tasmanians as they're moving forward, while also retaining those critical green spaces in urban areas that are a really important part of, obviously, for climate and biodiversity, but also for building community in some of those areas too. Something that's quite a big issue, particularly in Lyons, is the digital divide that we have here in Tasmania. So there's a lack of connectivity for a variety of reasons, due to black spots or sometimes the inaccessibility of certain kinds of connectivity that people might need, a more expensive satellite, for example. And we do have an issue in Tasmania with literacy in general, functional literacy, but also that extends to digital literacy. So we really need to make sure that we're upscaling programs so that people can access the online world. They need to do so for basic things like renewing their licenses, getting Centrelink payments, if people are looking for jobs online as well. People have to have that ability to use the online services, but they also actually have to have the online services available to them wherever they are in the state. That was a long answer, I apologise.
You're a part of the Greens Party. Can you talk a little bit about how the party works and the good and the bad aspects?
Absolutely. So the Tasmanian Greens, like all Greens right around the world, are set off the 4 main pillars that were agreed to many years ago. And one of the most important ones of that is participatory democracy. So all the decisions that are made within the Greens, be it a policy, a candidate selection, all of that comes from the membership base. Everyone has an opportunity to have input, to have constructive debate, and that absolutely goes the same for the elected Green representatives. We have to work collaboratively together. We make sure that we're all on the same page, that everyone's voices are heard, and that we move forward together and share each other's ideas, which is a really exciting way to go forward, to be able to have those discussions with one another, and it really emphasises building on one another's strengths. And with the 6 elected Greens that we currently have in the state parliament, we've got a lot of experience from diverse backgrounds, so being able to utilise all of that across everyone's portfolios is really exciting.
You are the youngest representative in Tassie Parliament. Have you found challenges or benefits?
It's interesting being the youngest representative in the Tasmanian Parliament, because I guess I bring a certain younger person's perspective, but I'm by no means young in broader society. For example, I was in the Speaker's role for the Youth Parliament, and they were quite shocked that I was the youngest, because to them it felt like they had quite a large age gap, and they're facing very different challenges to what I would be facing as a perceived young person versus a lot of other people in the parliament who are twice my age again. I think it's got its pros, because I'm bringing a voice to a Tasmanian generation to the parliament and making sure that our needs, challenges are met, and that also that the state's capitalising on the skills that we bring and the worldview that we have as well. In saying that, obviously would be great to have more young people, because their voices are so important, and we have still got that gap in terms of the generational experience that absolutely has to be heard within the parliament.
Are there people in parliament or other MPs, your team, that you work particularly well with or enjoy working with?
Yeah, we've got an absolutely fantastic crossbench, which the numbers on the crossbench are bigger than the opposition, so that's really exciting. It means that everyone has to be genuinely collaborative, and that the same goes for the 2 major parties as well. To get anything across the line, we do have to work together, and that's absolutely fantastic to have that diversity in the parliament that represents the diversity of Tasmania's voices and views of the world. If we can be working together to get what's best for Tasmania, that's absolutely the best possible democratic result and the best result for our community.
Is there a specific person that you do more work with than others, or just...
Honestly, the work is so well spread across the entire parliament, and it definitely makes us appreciate when there's 5 of us in the House of Assembly in the Greens. We've all got our workload really full, and for the last 10 years there's only been 2 members for the Greens, and that I can only imagine what they shouldered during that time. It's absolute testament to them to being able to achieve what they did just with the 2 of them.
You were elected in March 2024. Can you talk a little bit about what the election was like and maybe trends in politics?
Mm-hmm. Got to try. The election feels like a lifetime ago. I can barely remember it. But it was, because it was such a snap election, things moved really quickly, and it genuinely felt like one day we were announcing the candidates, the next day there's an election, all of a sudden it's all over and we're waiting to find out the results of the composition of what the parliament would actually be. But it was very interesting to see the spread of the votes in Tasmania and people moving away from the major parties towards alternative voices, and obviously the end result really represents that, which, as I said, is exciting to get that diversity of views being representative on the floor of Parliament. And that's something that we've seen the last federal election started to move towards that, with more Greens and Independents being elected. And as people continue to become frustrated with systems not working and the response to the challenges that we're currently facing, be it housing or the cost of living, which is not getting better at the moment either, and obviously the climate crisis as well. We're coming into summer, like we're likely to see some terrible bushfires and that kind of thing. People are going to shift their views, and they're going to be looking for individuals or minor parties with a high degree of integrity who are representing what's most important holistically to the community.
What's your favourite part of the Meander Valley?
Ooh, that's the hardest question. My favourite part of the Meander Valley, I think, is basically anywhere. I think the Meander Valley is so special in the view that it has out towards Coorparoo and Nyara, the Great Western Tiers. Being able to have that backdrop is quite unique, that diversity of mountains, particularly in somewhere like Tasmania where we're subjectively mountainous, but we've got nothing on the South Island of New Zealand or Nepal, for example. And it's so accessible to be able to get out there and go walking or be in nature, just to be by a creek and look for some platypus or something. I think it's very special, the local environment that is here. And there's probably more that we can do, particularly in townships like Deloraine, to look at tourism. It's probably a little bit underappreciated how special it is out here.
One last question.
Yeah.
Do you have aspirations?
I definitely have aspirations of some new acts that I'd like to be tabling in Parliament that we're currently drafting on. I can't talk about what they are at the moment, but I think that's really exciting. I think it sounds quite big picture and perhaps evasive, but really making sure that we are genuinely decreasing the intergenerational debt for future Tasmanians, because the struggles that Tasmanians young people already have, there's no way, I'd hate to see in another 10 years that get even worse. We have to make sure it's getting better, and we're only another term of government away from 2030 to meet our deadlines on climate change, and the role that Tasmania could be playing in that is absolutely enormous. The vast ecosystems that we have that are severely underprotected in this state and very much up for exploitation, such as Takina and even Coorparoo and Nyara here, we have a responsibility to do the right thing there, and I would hope that myself and the other Greens in Parliament are going to be able to really upscale making sure we look after those places properly for not just Tasmanians here today but future generations as well.
Oh, thank you, Tabatha.
Cool.